Thanks for coming. Yeah, my name is Lara. I am new at the College of St. Joseph. I'm teaching biology and genetics. And but renewable energy is a passion of mine. It's been a personal passion for us for many years now. And that's actually one of the reasons why we moved to Vermont, was because we thought that Vermont had better attitudes, both on the government level and just the population level, for renewable energy and sustainability and that sort of thing. So we're excited to be here. And it's also 50 degrees cooler than Texas, which is where we were moving from. So, and we came in June, so it was like perfect. I felt like I moved to paradise. So, and just check back with me in March.
We'll wait a little bit for that.
So the talk is about what Americans envision for the future of energy in this country, and how does that match up with reality and what's going on here. So just a few, charts and graphs, because it's a talk. We have to have those. So first off, how do Americans feel about energy? And this was a poll, an 11-year poll done, and this was published in the Boston Globe. And they were just asking people over the course of all this time what they feel about energy. And so what you see here, it's probably hard to read, but they broke it down by different sources of energy. And they also said, well, do you want this source? Do you think we should increase it, keep it the same, reduce it, or not use it at all? And as you can see here, the idea is that most people would like to reduce coal and oil and increase, especially solar and wind. So the average was like 81% of people over the course of 11 years want to increase solar, 78% want to increase our use of wind, and then decrease some of the fossil fuels. And so then the question became, okay, well, this is what Americans say that they want, so are we getting it? And the answer is a little. So over the same 11 years, this is just showing where are our sources of energy. And in green here, that's oil. So it is going down a little. And coal is in blue, and it's also going down a little. And then renewables, which would include solar and wind, is in red, and that is going up a little. So then the question is, well, all the first slide said was that they wanted it to increase. Does this count as increase? And I would conjecture that that's not what Americans had envisioned as far as increasing renewables. So then the question becomes, okay, well, what can we do to try to get the reality to line up more with what Americans say that they want? And my stance is that it's all about public policy. And the reason for what the energy sources we have and what resources we use has to do with decisions at the government level. And for example, solar. 99.5% of all solar power installations are clustered in 8 states. And 4 of these states make sense. They're in the Southwest, very sunny. But the other 4 states are actually in New England and the North Atlantic, which is not particularly known for its sunshine. So the question becomes, well, why are these 4 states in the top 8 as far as solar power installations? And it has to do with public policy. That if you go to New Jersey, for example, my father lives there, so I know, he says that you can get amazing tax credits for putting in solar, and yes.
Are we allowed to interrupt?
Absolutely.
Okay. When you say percent of, what is this? Is this kilowatt hours generated, per capita generation? Solar panel, number of panels per acre?
Yes.
How is it?
Yeah, more like that. So just because this is just about the installations, is how many solar panels they have there. Now, as far as kilowatt hours generated, you would imagine that these ones probably are generating pretty well.
Yeah.
These ones, they're there, and I'm sure they're helping out, but that's not the most ideal place to put the solar panels, sure. Now, conversely, as you could imagine, the places where solar panels would do the best would be in the Southwest. And so 4 of those states are overlapping as far as the states that have them and the states that could do the best with them. But then there are 5 other states that just don't have a lot of solar panels. And I want to talk about Texas because we just actually spent the last 9 years of our lives in Texas, so I know of a thing or two. Just a thing or two, actually. There's a lot about Texas I do not understand. But I do know a couple of things about solar in Texas.
So
yeah,
these 9 states,
Based on what? Is that because of the amount of sun?
Yeah.
Amount of sun.
Yeah, so like, for example, solar panels here would be more effective than solar panels anyplace else. So, goes back to everybody saying, well, why don't we just cover the entire Sahara Desert with solar and be done with it? We'll never have to use anything else. It's like, well, yeah, that would have a lot of sun, but it's not going to happen. So,
as long as we don't can move there, it'd be fine.
Right. Well, and energy transmission is an issue, obviously. So, Texas, for example, doesn't have a lot of solar, and one of the reasons for that is because it wants to do wind, which Texas has a lot of wind also. And Texas made it its goal to become the largest producer of wind in the world. They want to produce more wind energy than anybody else, and it's Texas, and they're practically their own country, so they could probably accomplish that. And if you drive out to Sweetwater, Texas, which is this area right here, it is the wind capital of the world, and they have more wind power than anybody else. And you drive down the highway and you see just ridges and ridges of wind turbines, much to the chagrin of some of the people that live there, but that is what they have decided to do. So they're focusing on wind, which is fine. Wind was one of the ones that people said they wanted to see increased, but that comes at a cost of focusing on solar, which, that could be just fine. But the other thing that Texas has a lot of, besides wind and sun, is sweet tea. No, it's actually oil, which is a huge component of Texas government, and they have a lot of lobbyists, and they have a lot of public policies driven to protect the oil industry. And so between focusing on wind for renewables and the power of the oil companies, you don't see a lot of solar in Texas. Now, Austin is different because Austin's weird, and they have more solar there, but where we were living up in the Dallas area, you just don't see solar panels like anywhere. And the power of public policy, in terms of, just to give you an example, in terms of the oil industry, is that this town called Denton, which is also near Dallas, in November of 2014, they banned fracking. They went to the polls and they said, we don't want this in our town, we don't think it's safe, we don't know enough about it. And so they banned it, and then 6 months later, the Texas state government the governor signed a law saying, you can't ban fracking, you can't. So they banned fracking bans. And so no city or municipality anywhere in Texas is allowed to prohibit fracking or anything to do with fracking, including waste disposal or anything at all. So that was, a lot of Texans felt that was rather hypocritical for Republicans to do something like that. And there was a big hoopla about it, but that happened really fast. So showing the power of the oil industries and the role of public policy in determining where our energy comes from is that this municipality was not able to protect itself. And just because I really care about fracking, fracking is also supported by the national government, and long before fracking came up, in 1976, the U.S. Congress told the EPA they need to start thinking about hazardous waste and regulating hazardous waste, and they need to come up with guidelines for how to do this. And as part of their guidelines, the EPA decided that anything that had to do with the oil industry is a special waste, and therefore is not going to get regulated at all. And so what the oil companies do is they go into this town, and because if you know anything about fracking, they basically pump a bunch of water and sand into the earth, and some of that comes back up again, and that's waste, and they have to do something with all this water. And so they dig these giant pits and then just dump the water in that, and they come to the town and they say, oh no, it's perfectly safe, all of this stuff is non-hazardous, look at the rule. And as a scientist, I would say the definition of whether a chemical is hazardous or not is a scientific thing. You can't just say, oh no, that's not hazardous. It either is or it isn't. It's not a subjective truth. So as a result, they have these pits opening up all over the place, which is one of the reasons why Denton was trying to ban the fracking, because they're like, look, that's going to get in our groundwater. There's no way to keep that out of the groundwater. And what's going to happen when brine, which is just extremely salty water, gets into your groundwater, you can't drink it anymore. And there's multiple carcinogens, including benzene and toluene, and a bunch of things that are known to the state of California to be carcinogens. Just heavy metals. I'm sorry, I just love all that packaging. This is known to the state of California. Nobody else knows about this, but California knows that this is a carcinogen. And then heavy metals and radioactive elements, radium. There's like more of that coming up in the fracking water than anywhere else. So, as a result of public policy, this gets to continue. My point is that we need to change our public policy if we want to get America to be sourcing its energy in the places that we say that we want it to. Now, my personal experience. So since we lived in Texas and we were like, hey, it's really extremely sunny here, let's put some solar panels on our house. So we did. And we put in a 5.1 kilowatt solar panel array. It cost us about $14,000 to do that. We got a 30% federal tax credit over the next couple of years. And I just want to show you the results. So here's in blue, this is a 6-year average of what our electricity bills were like over the course of different months. And then in 2014 was the first full year that we had solar, and the energy bills were significantly lower. I like this one especially, was like $1.26. And I'm like, that is an awesome bill to receive in the mail. Now the only reason it was $1.26 was because they refused to let us have a negative balance. They weren't going to pay us. So this is our house, and we had a roof on our garage that was facing south, and so we put the solar panels facing south there. This is for sale, by the way, if anybody knows anybody who wants a house. But just gonna stick that in there. So as we were trying to get this going, some of the problems we ran into, again, we were one of the first homes in the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is like millions and millions of people, to try to do something like this, which is insane because they have so much so much sun. But we had to shop around for electric companies, which you can do in Texas, and because we couldn't find some. We had several of them that were not going to pay us for the electricity. They were just going to, okay, yeah, you generate electricity. If you have any extra, we'll take it. No problem. We'll take it off your hands. And we had others that would be like, well, we'll pay you at 50% of what you're buying from us. And so we finally found one company that would actually pay us exactly the same amount for the electricity we were selling to them that they were selling back to us at nighttime. But they insisted that we also be on a variable rate plan. And so they kept varying our rates to the point where we would have to pay more. So that the 2014 curve that I showed you, if I showed you the 2015 so far, it's higher. So our bills are just not as low as they started off because they figured out how to jigger the numbers to make us pay more. And there's nothing we can do about it. We didn't have protections from the state to help us in this area. One of the things they did was that new fees just started popping up that had never been on our electric bill before, and they said weirdo things, and we couldn't figure out what these fees were, and we'd call the company, and they would pass us around to all these different people. And so, like I said, they refused to let us have a month where we had a zero bill or even a negative bill. They would throw some fees on there to make that more appealing. And then there was also months where they just wouldn't come check our meter. They would just guess. And they always guessed wrong. They always guessed that we used a lot more energy than we actually did. And so then my husband would have to call them and spend 5 hours on the phone to convince somebody to come out and actually check our meter so that they could change our bill, so that instead of paying $50, we actually only paid $1 or something like that. And now we're trying to sell this house, and we run into a completely different set of problems. The fact that no realtor knows what to do with solar panels. And so we figured that that would boost the price of our house because, hey, look, somebody can come in here and their electric bills are going to be way less. That's worth something. And they're like, no, that's really not worth anything. So the $14,000 investment that we put in there, they were going to give us nothing for it as far as house sale, which is why, part of the reason why the house is still on the market in a place where you can sell your house in 3 days. So that was just some of the problems that we encountered, just because when you're a pioneer, those are the problems that you have. And this is my stance, is that the role of the states is to protect consumers against these kinds of predatory practices. And the truth of the matter is that there's a bill being considered in Texas, and it's very similar to a law that was passed recently in Oklahoma, where if you are a homeowner that's connected to the grid and you add solar panels to your house, you get fined, basically. And the electric company's stance is, well, now that you're not paying for your electricity because you're generating your own, then you are putting in this burden on other people for upkeep of the grid. And so you have to pay this special fee to keep up the grid because you're not paying for your electricity anymore, and so that's not getting wrapped up in your bill. And I'm like, what? Like, nothing that you just said makes any sense at all.
Did you ever ask them what it would actually take for you to be able to get off of the grid, like completely?
Well, for us, what it would take is that we'd have to buy batteries. So we did not, that's all we did, was when it was sunny, we could generate electricity. But at night, on rainy days, cloudy days, whatever.
But do you know if the electric company would even allow you to get you off?
You know what? I don't know,
That's
but
a big problem in some areas, but
that's
I
true.
don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know Texas.
I don't. Mark, do you remember?
It's difficult to do it in the city.
Yeah.
If you're out in away from the metroplex, which is what they call the Dallas-Fort Worth gigantic area, the size of Connecticut, it's easier when you're out. But in the city, I think it's possible for you to be completely disconnected from the grid. But
No, in Vermont, once you're connected, you have to stay connected or you literally have to tear down your house. Like, that's one of the things that we're trying to fix as far as Vermont goes. You can't really get off of it.
Yeah.
You can get off of it. I would disagree with you.
It's a lot harder to get through than you think.
Okay.
It's difficult to see in that picture, but we completely covered the south-facing roof on the garage. Like, there's a border of maybe 2 or 3 inches all the way around. And we actually had more solar panels than we could fit, so we actually had to have a custom bracket built out of metal.
Like you can see.
Because the roof is just a regular gable roof, so we have 6 panels at the same angle as the south, but it's on the other side, on the north side of the roof. So for us to be completely off the grid, we would have to put some additional panels on the west-facing roof. That's above where the windows are. That's west.
Yeah.
That's a west-facing angle there, and have a battery bank.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was going
For
to
night production.
it was going to more than double the cost with the batteries and the additional solar. And we spent what we had. we had 14,000. That's what we spent.
Yeah. But you do hear of families that try to go off grid and get their kids taken away. So,
There's some
and
major
there,
stuff that
yeah.
goes on with it.
Yeah, because there's UN resolutions about being connected to grids and having access to consistent, I guess, reliable sources, and they don't think that people can do that on their own. So there's even more public policy that prohibit self-sufficiency as far as that's concerned. So yeah, we weren't intending to go off the grid with this. We were just trying to help, and we felt like we helped a lot. I mean, we had a graph to prove that, but we had to go through a pretty big rigmarole to get that done, and we hope that the bill does not pass in Texas that fines people for trying to be more self-sufficient. Yeah.
Did you know other people who wanted to use solar? And it seems to me people would be looking at the rules going, well, it's keeping the rain off, but it could be doing something else.
Right. Yeah, and that is part of it. And we heard of somebody. There's programs out there where you can like lease your roof, but the problem is that actually doesn't provide much cost benefit to the homeowner. And so part of the biggest issue from the people that I've talked to is the cost. No, people don't generally have $14,000 lying around, and actually we liquidated all of our retirement to do that. We decided that we were just getting out of the market, and that was going to be our energy self-sufficiency was going to be our retirement plan. That seemed logical at the time. It actually still does, but we don't regret it. But yeah, that's the hard thing, and I think one of the policies that somehow could be put in place is giving people a way to get solar panels that wouldn't require so much upfront cost. And we got a deal because we knew the guy who did solar panels, and he was trying to break into the DFW market. And so, because he had done some rural installations, but he was trying to get into the city because, again, millions and millions. I mean, our city had, what, 350,000 people living in it? I mean, that's a lot of roofs. So, and that's just our one part of the Metroplex. So, it would have been, I would hope that that area starts to follow the pattern of Austin of more and more people getting solar, but there's just, you have to talk it up to people, you just have to have peer pressure, and people think that this is a thing, and we can do this thing. And then just help from the government to protect them from predatory practices. Now, so what some of the policies, some just terminology that states have enacted to help this. One's called net metering. So that's the deal where if you have solar panels, you have to have a special kind of meter on your house that can run backwards, because most of them don't. And so we had to have them come out. If you look at the backside of our house, there's like meter here, and there, and all this stuff. But it's really cool to stand there and watch it run backwards. It's like, yes! So in 2007, there were 13 states that got a good grade for the policies that they had for net metering and forcing companies to allow people to have these kinds of meters that can run backwards. By 2010, 37 states out of 50 had good policies for that. So it's going in the right direction.
Who gives those grades?
This was it's in my works cited page, but this was this energy watchdog group that went out and graded these. And then the other one is interconnecting, actually, like you were saying, allowing homes to put solar panels on and connect those to the grids and feed energy back into the grids. And in, again, 2007, there was one state that had a decent interconnection standard, and now there's 20 states. So it's getting better. It's not the entire nation, and hopefully soon it will be. But those are two things that states can do to improve that situation. This is an incredibly fuzzy graph, but I just liked it. So it has to do with states that have plans to improve renewable energy was where I'm going with this. Every state in red has something called a renewable portfolio standard. So that means that they have set a standard of some sort in their state for how much renewable energy they want in their state. So for example, Texas says that they want 5,880 megawatts by 2015. Has to come from some kind of renewable source. So it's good when you have goals, you can actually start to achieve those goals. Vermont and all the ones in yellow have a renewable portfolio goal. So it's not a standard like you have to do this, but it's something to, again, force electric companies, you have to attain such and such % of your energy from renewable sources by such and such a date. And then the states in white don't have anything in place to force this to happen. So let's talk about Vermont. Vermont's, as you know, because you live here, Vermont's really great about renewable energy, and they're really into it, and they push that. In 2011, they made this comprehensive energy plan, and so the goal is by 2015, 90% of all the energy produced in Vermont will come from renewable sources, which is an ambitious goal, and it would be awesome if we could get to that point. And then this year they passed something called Act 56, which was a renewable energy standard. That was the goal that was on that previous slide, said it had a goal, and that by 2017, so just a couple of years from now, 55% will be renewable, and that by 2032, 75% will be renewable. So they're giving steps to get to that 2050 goal, because that's kind of far away. So it's nice to have intermediate steps, so that's not just by 2049 and we're still at 12%, and we're not going to make it. Shucks, So at least getting them toward that renewable energy standard. And then on the national level, most of what's happening as far as renewable energy standards is happening on the state level. The national government is not really taking this up on a federal level, but they are doing some things. The Department of Energy has this goal of, in America, we're going to have 20% of our energy coming from wind by 2030. And that happened at the very end of the Bush administration. And they did this study and they said, this is perfectly feasible. There's no actual physical barriers to us getting 20%. We have the wind available, we have the technology to do this, we just have to do it. And we got a 30% tax credit for putting a solar panel array on our home, and so that comes at the federal level. And then recently, this year, the EPA they put in this cross-state air pollution rule, and the Supreme Court ruled on that and said that that's okay, that the EPA could do this. And the idea is that if you've ever watched the Weather Channel, we have this jet stream, and it pushes air from the west to the east. So what happens is these coal plants, say in Ohio, all the states have standards of clean air and all that stuff, but because of wind, all of the pollution that they produce, the sulfur dioxides and nitrous oxides and stuff like that, don't stay in Ohio, they wind up in Vermont. So Ohio's like, hey, our air is just fine, and Vermont's like, we're not even burning coal, and we have air pollution, come on, this is not fair that you just pushing your pollution off to us. So the EPA is putting in these rules about you can't just let the wind push your pollution off to somewhere else. You have to clean up your act so that other places don't have to suffer as a result. And there's studies about how much asthma and stuff on the East Coast is due to Midwest coal-fired plants. And there's nothing that we can do about it because we can't make the wind any different. So, in conclusion, step 1, at the very beginning, this is what Americans said they want, but answering a poll is extremely easy. Now Americans have to decide what they want to do about what they want. Do they want it strong enough to get up and do something? And then 2, once they figure out what it is they are willing to put effort into, they have to make sure that what's going on in the state capitol, in the national capitol, is supporting what they want to have happen. And that getting people to do stuff is the hardest part. Getting people to say they want stuff is pretty easy. So there's a couple of the websites that I pulled from to get all my wonderful data, and this was the Boston Globe report at the very beginning, and I can share that with anybody who would like to look into some of those things. And I just want to say thank you to Green Mountain Power for letting me come here and talk about something that I'm passionate about, and let me share my history experience with renewable energy. And thanks for St. Joseph for actually passing that invitation on to me. And my husband, a lot of those graphs he looked up and he made himself, so I can't claim that I did this talk all by myself. It's like, hey hon, remember that data that you had? Can you make a graph out of that? Thanks. So thank you for coming.